Yes. They're the best therapy. Well, when I was younger, I remember working with a social worker in the hospital with my grandma, and I remember thinking, "Oh, I really wanna help people like that." And then I met my husband, Doug, and he had gotten a master's degree in psychology with a focus in substance abuse. And right after we married, he started his doctorate degree. So I sat and listened to him in study groups for hours and hours and hours on end talking about counseling. And I thought, I think that's what I want to do. I have always wanted to help people. And, once I, heard them and heard what they were doing, I was like, "That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get a degree in counseling and help people that way."
How's that? Okay. We apologize for that. We had some technical issues and was told that you did not hear us. So uh, we just want to say we're going to kind of start over because we don't want to miss out on anything. Right now, I have Shannon with me,
Yep.
and Shannon has a background in counseling.
Yep.
Shannon?
Yep. I have a master's in counseling. I did practice. I practiced counseling for a while I was in my degree. I'm no longer practicing in that vein, but I do have that background.
All right. And we have Mary Carpenter with us. She is a licensed counselor. She is actually a licensed master social worker. And her husband, Doug, have a practice that they operate and own out in Auburn Hills in psych counseling. And also, you have 17 more counselors in that practice, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they all specialize in all different
We have
areas?
child counselors, we have adult counselors, we have substance abuse counselors, people that specialize in trauma. Um, Pretty much we cover most issues that someone may come in with.
Okay. And Mary, if you didn't hear the first time, and I apologize for that, we will get that fixed. Um, she has two children, a son and a daughter, and the newest addition, a daughter in love. And she, for her self care, loves her little fur babies. And what kind of dogs do you have, Mary? What are they?
I have King Charles Cavaliers. They're lap dogs and they're like Velcro. So wherever I am, they are.
That's awesome. Okay, you did hear, I think you heard Mary about how she actually got involved in counseling. You just were not hearing our questions. So I want to go to our second question. And for you personally, what kind of areas do you specialize in?
Well, initially, I had been involved in children's ministry for as long as I could remember. And so initially, my passion was children and I wanted to counsel children. But as I started doing that, I realized that, okay, I only have such a limited impact on these kids because a lot of it is coming from their parents.
Mm,
And as adults, we know that if we don't work on our own issues, our own unresolved trauma, our own problems from our primary caregivers,
yeah.
that carries over into our parenting. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to deal with the root of this and start dealing with adults and their past trauma. So my passion is women who have unresolved issues from their past, depression or sexual abuse or some kind of trauma, and helping them realize how that is playing out in their current life and how that is playing out in their parenting or their marriages. Because whatever we bring with us into relationships comes out in one way or another. And if we can resolve that, put that where it belongs, put the conflict that we're having in our marriage where it belongs, maybe that's an unresolved conflict with dad. And, if you can recognize, okay, this is really not about my spouse, this is about issues I have from growing up. And if I can figure that out and resolve that, then it doesn't have to be from generation to generation. We can resolve it and we can have a better life going forward. We can say this cycle stops with me.
Yeah, that's good. What do you find, like percentage wise nowadays? Because it seems like everyone, that you run into has some issues from their past, because life, nobody's perfect, and we
Right?
grow up in homes that are dysfunctional, a lot of us. And so I guess percentage wise, what would you say? 100?
Oh, I can't even give it a number, but I know it's really hard. We
Yeah.
joked with our kids that, okay, well, we're saving money for your therapy. But the truth is, even as counselors, we do things that can
Yeah.
create loss for our kids, create little t traumas for our
Mm,
kids in ways that we don't realize, and so it's acknowledging those things and saying, "Okay, I'm a failed human too. I'm gonna try my
yeah.
absolute best, but there may be stuff that comes out that I'm not aware of." And often as parents, we're defensive against that.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
kids call us out on something, our defenses go up and, we argue with them instead of being vulnerable and listening and being like, okay, maybe my child has something of value to say to me that I really need to look at and examine,
Sure.
Yeah.
so I think that the percentage is very high. I can't give a number to it, but I do know that there's things that I have done in my parenting where like blind spots. We all have blind
Yeah.
spots that we're not aware of. And our mirror is the people that we interact with. It is our children. It is our spouse. It is the relationships that we have struggles in.
Yeah.
There's a mirror there that there's something maybe that I need to own, that I need to work on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's so true. Honestly, as a parent myself, it's so important to have a sense of awareness of yourself,
Yeah.
and then also how you're showing up. And oftentimes, for me, if I find that I'm overworked or overstressed and whatnot, it ends up coming out in the interactions that I have with my kids. And I've become a bit more mindful of how am I showing up, and then how is my presence impacting them. Um, and as a parent, not being afraid to say, hey, I'm wrong or I'm sorry in those moments where you slip up or you overreact, or um, again, you just have so much going on. And as a woman, you got emotions and not just emotions, but you have the hormones
Yeah.
going on, right? And so it's so important
Yeah.
to be mindful of that and be in the moment with them and show them how to navigate when you mess up,
Yeah.
even in those
Show them how to
moments.
be vulnerable. Yeah, like,
Exactly.
I mean, it's a very vulnerable thing to go to your kids and say, "Look, I messed up.
Yes.
I own that. You are right." I mean,
Yeah.
how often do we say that to our kids?
Right.
"You are right." I
Yeah.
was wrong. I own that. I'm sorry. But so many of us carry pride
Mhm.
and don't want to face our
Yeah.
mistakes.
Yeah.
But there have been times that I've gone to my kids and I've been like, "You know what? If there is something that I have done that you need to resolve with me, please talk to me about
Mhm.
that. I don't want there to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
anything unresolved between us." But you
Yeah.
have to be
Right.
vulnerable and
Mhm.
ready for whatever it is that they may say,
Right, and
and
not get
then not
upset.
defensive
Yeah.
when they say it.
Right.
And it creates that space of healing, right? It
Yeah.
offers
Absolutely.
them an opportunity to heal and not feel like they have to take the world upon themselves. Um, and it validates how they might be feeling
Yes.
as well and gives them that security, which as parents, we should give them that
Right.
security. So, in that space of you working with parents, you're, like you said, indirectly impacting those children's at the onset and getting to the root of what's going on so that it's not a generational cycle of
Yes.
um, feeling obsolete or overlooked or shamed, and then those things showing up in our behaviors and in the children's behaviors as they grow up.
I think the
Right.
generational thing that's a good point too, because and a big point to say you're sorry
Mhm.
because years ago when my kids were little, I heard Dr. James Dobson on his radio program, and he was talking about how you need to apologize and all of that, and it really hit me because it really, honestly, it was the first time I ever really heard that, because I grew up, that wasn't the case. You're the child and you just listen. And we were just talking about that earlier, that one of
You're
the
seen, not
biggest
heard.
lies, that was one of the biggest lies, is that a child should be seen and not heard. And I was just telling them, because on Tuesday nights we started this prayer with the children the first Tuesday of every month. I'm telling you, it's probably the best thing that I have seen in those Tuesday night prayers. I'm watching these children get up, and the first thing I did with them is I said, "Listen, when the children went to the Lord, the adults tried to rebuke them, and yet Jesus rebuked the adult." And I said, "So I want you," and so I really, pounded it in their head that night. I'm like, "Listen, you have a voice, you matter." Because when I was raised, there wasn't. It wasn't. It was like, you go over there and you keep quiet. And so a lot of stuff was swept under the rug, a lot of things. And in counseling, you have to deal with, people that have gone through that kind of stuff. And so saying you're sorry and is so huge, because just because they're children, I mean, they're amazing. They have minds that are being created, and their creativity and their knowledge and everything, they're just like little sponges. And to teach them correctly,
Yeah.
give
Because their
them a
worlds are
voice.
being framed as they're growing.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, these concepts even apply in our relationships, our significant other relationships, being vulnerable and
Mm.
saying, "I'm sorry," truly, "I'm sorry," without a but following it,
Yes.
and really listening to the other person's hurt and
Yeah.
pain,
Mhm.
even though it may have come from me.
Mhm.
That's really
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
listen to someone say, "I'm hurt by you. I'm hurt by this behavior,"
Hmm.
and so you have to be ready and vulnerable to be able to hear that and truly say, "I'm sorry
Yeah.
that I have caused that pain for you."
Amen. Okay, so how I know a lot of things have changed, like even since COVID. It seems like just so much of the like mental illness has become an awareness. And I don't know, it seems to have gotten just massive. But one of the questions is, how has mental health awareness changed in these recent years, and especially among women. What have you seen?
Well, I think media plays a big part of that. I mean, how much more are we seeing mental illness in the news?
Yeah.
Shootings,
Yeah.
people going ballistic on job sites. We're seeing a lot of that. And so insurance companies have finally made parity with mental health and physical health, where now mental health is considered equal in most cases, to physical health. So thank God for that, because there's a lot of mental illness out there that's creating societal problems. But
Hmm.
then we have Facebook and social
Yeah.
media. And so you see a lot of often really good information about mental health. I'm often reposting things that I come across that I feel like will be really helpful for people, like little memes that show, how to do self care or what
Yeah.
overthinking looks like, the iceberg of overthinking, what we see the problem is versus what's underneath the
What's
surface
underneath?
of all the
Exactly.
problems. And so I think there's a lot of awareness about that from, people posting and people talking about it more,
Yeah.
where I think in the past, mental illness, you don't talk about it. You don't say, "Hey, I struggle with bipolar disorder," or you don't say, "I have schizophrenia."
Yeah.
God forbid you acknowledge that you have a mental illness,
Mhm.
but no, let's talk about it. Let's deal with it.
Mhm.
If you need medication, go
Let's
see a
treat it.
doctor for that.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you have diabetes, you're gonna go to a doctor and get medicine for your diabetes. If you
Yeah.
have a mental illness, you need to go to a doctor and, address that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And because a lot of times and I don't think it's as much, but I remember when I got into church, there were so many people that would take, like, if you go see a doctor or if you get on medication, that you lack faith, and the one thing I love about there's so much awareness about it now is that that's taken right out of the equation because Luke was a doctor. And the Lord made sure that he was in the book. Like he's in there and he's talked about as a physician. And if they weren't important, why would even God himself make sure that that was a thing that was in the Bible?
Yeah. And something that I used to say when we would go through our mental health classes at my job was that um, if you are willing to take care of your physical health, why wouldn't you be willing to take care of your mental health? You are a complete person, and part of that being that complete person is being able to care for the different facets of what makes you a human being. Your mind, will, emotions, all of those things play a role in your behavior, which also plays a role in your physical health. How your mind is processing things can impact your physical health. When you suffer from anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses, it can increase blood pressure, it can cause an increase in cortisol in your body, it can cause inflammation. So it's so important to not just go to the doctor for a broken leg, but it's also important to go and heal your mind, heal your emotions, because that is part of what makes you a human being.
Yes.
And I'm glad that we are removing that
Yeah.
stigma that once was there, where you have to have it perfect and put together. You have to be the perfect family. Don't tell
Mhm.
anybody about our
Any issues?
problems,
Yeah.
any issues. And even in the Black community, I know that that's still a thing where you don't talk about your personal business
Mm.
outside of your home. You deal with it on your own, and you and God get in a room together and you have to figure it out. But sometimes it is essential
Yes.
to work things out. And especially as women, a lot of times we process by talking.
Hmm.
We get things off of our mind by being vocal. And so you need that safe space. And sometimes it's not in that friend group who can then pass judgment, or
Right.
you can't take it back once you said it, and so now it's in the back of their mind. So sometimes you just really need that safe space with a neutral person who's able to listen, come in, provide resources, and whatever have you, so that you can navigate what's going on in your whole being.
Yeah. You know what? I experienced that through when I had that accident years ago. Knowing that your mind, your body, and your spirit, they're all three, and they have to, if one of those things are not in balance, then you are messed up. No matter how you look at it, you are off balance. And I know that that's a long process sometimes. And, you know, in order for you to get your emotions, or and like you were saying, you have to take it sometimes out of that friend group, because some people are too close. And the thing is, when you're not in an emotional spot to hear, like to be honest, I would hear things when I was not physically well after my accident, and I would hear things that I know people meant for good, they thought. However, those things stabbed, those things wounded, those
Yeah.
things. And then now I not only have to work through this physical thing, now I have to work through this emotional thing. and
Mhm.
and so and then it feeds over into your spiritual. And
Right.
so it's all messed up. So it is good to seek that counselor. It is good. I mean, even the Bible talks about that.
Mhm.
It is wise. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful. And can you kind of expound on, even in counseling, like, you guys are so absorbed with everyone else's issues. How do you stay well?
Well, you definitely have to have very good boundaries mentally. And, part of our self care is not taking on everyone else's problems.
Hmm.
Mhm.
A lot of times people expect us to have a fix for them in 6 sessions. Well, how long did it take for you to get to this place? You
Right.
know,
Mhm.
years and years and years. It's not gonna be fixed overnight. We can give you some tools, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, and sometimes that isn't, overnight. But early in counseling, it's easier to, like, take on those problems and carry those
Mm.
home. As you're more experienced, you learn those
Right.
boundaries that you can't take all that on. You can't, just carry all that with you. That's really God's job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Our responsibility is to take that to Him and take all of our burdens and our cares to Him and leave
Yeah.
them at His feet, so we pray for our clients. If there's something that we're carrying from dealing with some of the issues, because we hear some pretty rough things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some significant traumas that people have been through that are just heartbreaking. And again, boundaries and, saying, okay, God, I can't help them the way you can. You
Mhm.
can intervene in this situation, but give me the tools where I can do my best on my end.
Yeah.
Can I go
And
back and address something that
Yeah.
Kelly had mentioned?
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
you said something about Luke being a physician. Can I give you a little quiz? Just a
Yeah.
couple questions.
Yep.
Where was Calvary? What hill was Calvary on?
Golgotha.
Yep. Do you know what that means?
You know what? I've heard this before, but it's
The
uh,
place of the skull.
the place of the
Mm.
skull. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting
Hmm.
that Jesus died on the place of the skull? He
Hmm.
shed
Wow, yeah.
his blood over one of our biggest battles,
Right.
our mind.
Huh.
That's powerful.
Yeah, that is. Never thought about that at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Think about how many times in the scriptures it talks about our mind and
Yes.
overcoming the battles of our mind. Jesus
Mhm.
shed his blood on the place of the skull
Hmm. That
over
can
our
preach.
minds, where one of our
Right.
greatest battles will be.
Mhm.
Yes. And he tells us it all starts right there, you know, and as women, you know, let's address that for a second, because you mentioned something a little bit ago where we can take things, and you put it in a different way, but we can take things and we can, it's this little, and by Tuesday it's this big, and it's actually we have received these thoughts and everything into our mind. And you know what, I guess, can you give some tips on, as women we're emotional beings, and what is your suggestion for that, don't, not to dwell, you know, on that.
Address things quickly. Like, if someone has done something or said something, go to them. I mean, that's scriptural.
Mhm.
You are to go to somebody and try to make things right.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be able to do that with everybody, but there are gonna be people where you're gonna, be able to say, "You know what? When you said that, that was very hurtful to me,
Mm.
and, I just need you to know that." Some people are gonna be like, "So what?" And some people are
Yeah.
gonna be like, "I'm sorry, that I did that." But try not to let them, that fester within you. It's like if you have a wound and you just put a Band-Aid on it and you don't treat what's
Yeah.
underneath it, it's gonna get infection. You've gotta, like, clean out whatever is at the root of that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, and like I said, I know as women, I've done it myself. You take something like that someone has said, and you know, I don't like conflict. You know, that's just my
You ruminate on
personality.
it.
Right,
You
right.
just let it.
And then I'm like, Lord, just, you know, take it away from me. But then, you know, there are times, like you said, the healthy thing is go to that person, because you don't want them to keep doing that, you know, and so that's
Right.
important.
Oh,
And
and it
sometimes,
you mentioned immediately you don't like conflict. Does it have to be conflictual? Can you go to that person
Mhm.
in the right spirit? I
Yeah,
think
mhm,
how you go to somebody often dictates how they respond.
right.
right.
If you go at them, their walls are gonna go up
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
If you go to them and say, ask permission to present your issue with them. "Hey, there's something that I would like to talk to you about. Are you
Mhm.
in a space where you can talk about it?"
Yeah, that's
That
perfect.
Yeah.
immediately diffuses it. It lets them know they need
Yeah.
to be open to what you're gonna say.
And a lot
I
of,
maybe even I have something that's gonna be really hard to talk about, or
yeah.
is this a good time? Ask
Right.
permission for them to be open, and if they say no, respect that. "Okay, can you let me know when we can talk about this?"
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really good. And it's important because a lot of times we go to it because out of our emotions,
Yeah.
or and we want to
Absolutely.
say,
Mhm.
we're like,
Yeah,
you know how you made me feel like this or whatever. And it is important. I like what you just said. Ask permission first,
Yeah.
because they may have, you know, gotten a car accident on the way to where you just
Right.
saw them, or we don't know what their background story is.
Right. And one thing that we can do, um, or two things. One, assume positive intent. Don't automatically think that everyone is your enemy,
Right,
right? Because we can do that too, and just carry and harbor offense
right.
from others. But something that my husband had spoken to me once was, think about that person. What are the qualities of that person? Is that person's intent to harm you, to do you
Right.
evil, to do you bad? Um, like you said, think about what that person might be going through. Why might that person be responding or reacting to you in that manner? Could it be something else that's going on the inside of them? It may not always be
Hmm.
about us. I know
Right.
that's a shocker. Um, but it may not always be
Yeah.
about us. Now, that's not a pass to just let people bulldoze over you, but in your self reflection, being able to take a step back from the situation, pause and say, is this person going through something else? Is it really something that I did that warranted, especially in
Right.
conflict
Right.
situations? Did Sister Pastor Kelly. Did Pastor Kelly really mean to snap at me on Sunday, or is there something else going
Right,
on?
right.
No, she didn't really snap at me on Sunday, but
But I can because I can be emotional and you're in a hurry and
yeah,
you don't
and
think
you're
about how
busy.
somebody is receiving
Hmm.
something. So I have had those moments, where it's like, oh, okay, just hold on a minute. I got to get out. And then somebody could take that as, but I'm just on a mission and I'm
Right.
not thinking,
And that's why it's important to pause.
yeah,
Even before you're going to someone, don't just unload all of your emotions and then they're stuck with dealing with what you're going through and they're already going through something. But take that moment to pause and think, what's going on with that other person? What's going on with me? How is it best to approach the situation? Is this something that I just need to deal with between me and God? Or is this something that I need to go to that person and say, hey, when you do this or when this happens, this is how it impacts me? And not putting fault on that person, but just pointing back to how you're impacted by such behaviors or words
yeah.
or whatnot, because then it doesn't make that person feel like they need to be so defensive in that moment.
Well,
And
we also see things through our own filter.
yes,
Like our
Exactly.
filter colors most of our interactions,
mm,
and stopping to think about what are the facts,
Exactly.
not our emotions. What are the
right.
facts of
Hmm.
this interaction? This person said these words, not what I think they said, but what did they say?
Yes.
Like what are the facts? What is the story I'm telling myself about?
Hmm.
Because we create stories about that.
Yes.
They are this way, or they're upset with me, or those are stories. Those aren't
Mhm,
facts. Those are things I'm creating about that interaction. The facts
mhm,
are this person said you did a terrible job or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the facts? Stick to
mhm,
only the facts. And then think about, are there times when I can be the same way?
mhm,
Are there times when I show up the same way?
Right.
And being able to give that person the benefit of the doubt, putting yourself
right,
in their shoes, like you said, where who knows what's going on? They may
Yeah.
have just gotten the worst phone call that they've
mhm,
ever received, and being like, okay, there have been times that I have felt this way too. What
right,
did I need when that happened? And that might be what they need.
Hmm. That's good.
yeah. It's the grace, right?
Yes.
God gives us His grace.
Right.
My grace is sufficient for you.
Mm,
My strength is perfected in your weakness.
yes.
And so, as much as God gives us His grace, we have to have grace for others. We have
Hmm.
to extend that grace to others. No one is perfect.
Right.
We all fall short of the glory of God. And so, it's so important to, again, pause. Pause that reflective piece.
Mm,
Even in counseling with others, um, people might come into the counseling office, and I don't know if you've had that experience where they're expecting you to have all of the answers and tell them what to do, but that's really not how the counseling process goes. We help people work through and navigate what's going on in their lives and then come up with their own goals
Yes.
of what they want to see happen or have their own outcomes of the counseling session. But it's not necessarily the counselor coming in saying you need to do this and this. It's a reflective process where you work
Hmm.
through and you talk through those emotions, those feelings, what's real, what's not real, what's made
Hmm.
up, those stories as you stated, and you're navigating through all of those things so that healing can take place.
Do you feel like people have an easier time giving others grace than even giving yourself grace?
Mm.
For sure.
Yeah.
And forgiving themselves for things that they have
Mhm.
Mm,
done. Sometimes,
Yeah.
people almost become like God. So you'll allow God to forgive you, but you won't forgive yourself.
yeah.
Right.
That's a tough position to be in.
Mhm.
Are you saying you're greater than God, that He will forgive
Yeah.
whatever you've done? Like, his forgiveness is instantaneous. Ours
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
We hold on to things,
Right.
Ours is a
you
process.
know,
Yes. Right.
but we have to learn to let go and have
Mhm.
grace for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and I've said this before in Alpha, when we were doing that Alpha course, forgiveness, because that's a huge thing. And sometimes your husband actually taught me something when in a counseling session that I, uh, I'm trying to forgive someone. I'm trying to forgive someone. I'm beating myself up because I can't forgive this person right now. And he made a really good point, but it's graphic, but he said, listen, if you're in the midst, if honestly you were in a midst of being raped, would you be able to forgive that person in the midst of that? And I said, well, absolutely not. Like, no. I mean, it would be a process. And he said, well, then why are you expecting when you're in the midst? Why are you expect? And I mean, that is stuck with me. That is
That's
the most
freeing, I'm
profound.
sure.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was so freeing because I really, really was beating I'm like, Lord, why can't I forgive? Why can't, and it was just, but when we were in Alpha, so going through that course, there was a point he was talking about Jesus on the cross, and all of that forgiveness was brought, all the things, all the turmoil, all the sin, all the was all brought to Jesus. And the blood that flowed from him is the forgiveness also that flowed from him. And it was a very profound moment for me that I said, so the blood of Jesus, the forgiveness that's on him, the only thing I need to do is allow that to flow through me. And so
Mhm.
his blood and his forgiveness and I that was freeing. That
Yeah.
was so freeing. And those two things were very profound and very freeing. So now I feel like it's easier to forgive. It's easier. And not that I'm human, I'm still flesh, and it's still going to be
Mhm.
a process in some areas, but it's so freeing to just have that picture in your mind
Yeah.
of Jesus on that cross and his blood just flowing through you, and that's the forgiveness flowing through you. It's not really your forgiveness,
Right.
you know.
Right, right. Unforgiveness of others, I often describe to people in counseling like you're in a prison, their prison. They're
Hmm.
holding you prisoner when
Mhm.
you are not forgiving them. And they probably don't even think about what they've done. They don't think about your hurt.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we hold on to so many things that the other person has not even thought about for years.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I've done that before. There have been some things that have been very hurtful, and I've just
Yeah.
held on to them and dealt with them for a long time, and finally, I went and talked to the person, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize that I did that." But it was like,
Mhm.
I was prisoner to them,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
weren't even realizing, and it's so like, "Okay, I need to let go of that, so I'm no longer in that prison." I
Yeah.
need to, like, say, "Okay, I'm gonna let go of whatever it is I'm holding on because why should I be prisoner to them and what they've
Mhm.
done?"
It's kinda like you putting yourself in a prison when it's
Yes.
unlocked and just keeping
Yeah.
yourself there.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
Walk out the door. Let
Walk
go of
out.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, for do you find yourself that you are actually counseling more women, being a woman
Yes.
counselor? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, how would you say, this is one of our questions, how can women support each other emotionally in their personal and professional lives? What would you say the
Well, I think women need to make time for women. How often do we say, "Let's go grab coffee," or "Let's go out and have dinner," but then does it actually happen?
right? So many times.
So
Right.
often we say that in conversation, "Let's get together." Then it never happens.
Yeah.
And so when you make that one-on-one time and you make that a priority, then you can have vulnerable conversations. You can
Mhm.
be real with each other. And I really think there's only a very few people that are safe people. that you
Hmm.
can be
Yeah.
really honest and vulnerable with, and they love you no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so find those people, find that group of people that you know that what you say doesn't go any further than them. It
Right.
doesn't become a prayer request on
Right.
some prayer list,
Yeah.
where it's really just a gossip sharing session, which that
Mhm.
happens
Right.
a lot.
Yep.
It's I got a prayer request and it's really just sharing information that you
Yeah.
want everybody to know,
That
but you
wasn't
don't
even
want to be
your
called a
information.
gossip,
Right, not
Yeah. It
right, to
wasn't
share,
yours to
right.
share.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Find those people who aren't gonna do that and,
Right.
that you can be real with and really build, even if it's 1 or 2 very deep, very vulnerable relationships where
Mhm.
even if time passes where you can't get together, that person is still your person.
Yeah,
Yeah. You gotta have a safe
you
person.
do.
It's that you can share stuff with. And sometimes I guess, saying that, there are times too, though, you need to be careful yourself, everything you're sharing, because you're putting something on somebody who isn't trained. They're not a trained counselor like yourself that's a professional. And so you're really unloading. And what is it doing to that person? Even if, you love them, they love you, they're praying for you and all that, they're going home and they can still have that. So I think that having that counselor, that one person who's not really in the situation is
Yeah.
so much better. Um,
Yeah.
and not to, that I'm saying, not to share and stuff. I'm just saying it's
It
so
has
much
to be a
better.
balance, like you said,
Yeah.
because you don't want to unleash everything that you're going through on someone
Yeah.
else. But it is beneficial to come together and not just talk. Sometimes you do need
Yeah.
that space to
Hmm.
vent and, talk through it with your friend. Um, but other times, let that going to that person, let that also turn into a time of prayer
Yes.
where now both of you can come together in agreement on
Yeah.
something and cast it to the Lord because he's the one who cares the most, for us. And so it's not taking it
Yeah.
won't be that taking it on yourself. It will be you guys together aligning, agreeing, and giving it to the Lord.
And you know what? I've never walked away from a situation like that and felt worse.
Mhm.
Like if
Right.
like you said, come together in prayer and you guys can pray for one another. I've never walked away and said, oh, I still feel bad. It's always you feel lighter, you feel better because you have released that and laid that down.
And certain friends you go to with certain things. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily go to an unmarried friend with my married
Yeah.
problems, right? Or talk to them about my married problems. Because one, they're single.
Right.
And
Right.
there's a disconnect in that way. But two, they're single, and I don't want to deter them from anything that God is
Getting
sending their
married.
way. You know,
Right.
and so you
Yeah.
be mindful of how or who am I sharing what with? Who am I coming into agreement with for what?
Yeah.
So that you're not oversharing and so that you protect yourself and you protect them as well.
And you know what? I think that looking at that in that kind of way or in a business aspect or anything, I think it's wise to look at somebody who's successful. Like, okay, Doug and Mary have a successful marriage and they worked through different issues, whatever. I'm going to them with my
Right.
issues about marriage. I would never, you always want to do that. It's like, if you want to be successful at a certain,
Mhm.
spot in your life or certain avenue, you're going to go to that person
Yeah.
that is already there, so you can just learn from them and they're going to be wiser
And
than,
grow. Because they've been
yes,
through it.
right.
They've walked through it.
Think those relationships need to be reciprocal too. Find
And
people where the
yes.
relationships are reciprocal and not one-sided,
Mm,
where
Mhm.
you're always the dumping ground for somebody. That's not
Right.
healthy for
no,
you
it's
to
not.
be the dumping ground for people and you not having a place where you can share.
Yeah.
So I think, personally, our growth in that is being a safe container,
Right.
practicing being a safe container for people and being able to put boundaries on not carrying that stuff with us so much of just hearing and, you know, processing the stuff with them and not taking it on,
Mhm.
just
We're
being
not the
like, "Okay,
saviors.
I hear you."
No, we're
Sometimes
not.
we just wanna be heard. We just
Right.
wanna be validated. "I hear you. I understand why you might feel that way." Saying, "I understand," doesn't mean that what you're feeling is right or
Right.
wrong. It's
Right.
just saying, "I can understand your perspective. I can understand where you're
Yeah.
coming from." And just
Mhm.
learning to be safe for people.
Yeah.
And that means
Yeah.
not sharing that beyond that,
Right.
but, like,
Mhm.
having that person as well, and I know in leadership and
Yeah.
sometimes, roles where people are looking up to you, it's hard
Yes.
to be vulnerable, and it's
Yeah.
hard to share your personal
Yeah.
stuff,
Mhm.
so you have to work on being vulnerable, and you build those relationships. You don't dump everything all at once. You say, "Okay,
Right.
I'm gonna share something with you and see if you're a safe person or not." If that information comes back to me, you're not safe.
Right.
If it
Right.
comes back in another way, you're not a
Learn
safe
once.
person. And I've
Yeah.
learned and I know that I
Mhm.
can't trust you. But
Right.
find people that are safe and practice yourself being a safe container. How would I want this information that's been shared with me treated?
Right.
If I were in this position and
Yeah.
truly any of us can find ourselves in positions we never thought we would be in, that's
Mhm.
just life. We can say, "Oh, I would never do that."
Right.
Right.
And,
Here I
life has a
am.
way of saying, "Here you
So
are, and
Yes.
it's you."
mhm.
Yeah.
So, how would you want to be
Yeah.
treated? How would you want information that you've shared with someone treated? And
Mhm.
so, practicing, okay, well, I'm
Yeah.
gonna hold that in confidence because this person's valuable to me, and I wouldn't want that shared
Yeah.
if it
Right.
was me.
Yeah. One thing, when I was practicing as a counselor, one thing that they told us or they taught us is that understand how things are impacting you as the counselor. And if it's crossing a boundary or you're feeling some type of way, you can't be afraid to step back and say, hey, I need to refer you
Yeah.
to someone else. And the same thing in your friendships. I'm not saying disown that friend, but say, hey, you sharing this with me is bringing up some things in myself. So
Yeah.
I might not be the best person
Yep.
for you to share this with. I'll be praying for you. I love you. I don't want you to feel like you can't come to me. But right now I'm dealing with, some things on my own. And this is impacting my ability to, work through that.
And
Because, like
that
you
right
said,
there is
it's
a great
boundaries.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's also a really good cue to yourself that you need to go to counseling over those issues.
Hmm.
If you are
Yeah.
being
Right.
highly
Exactly.
triggered by somebody and what they're saying, that is a cue.
Hmm.
Okay, this is unresolved trauma in my life, and I need to do self care
Yeah.
about that. I need to
Yeah.
go see somebody and try to come to a resolution to that so I'm not carrying that with me
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Trauma, you mentioned trauma a couple times actually, and the book, and I have to get this book. It's because I've had a couple people tell me about this, but it's your body, is it Your Body Keep Score?
Body keeps score.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you read
Yep.
that, Mary? And what do
I've
you
read
what
pieces of it, but I've been to his workshops before, and it's really good. Our body does keep score of things that we've been through.
Mm.
Yeah. And I know, like, for instance, like right now I'm going through, and this is physical, after my accident, and I had to get that titanium in my neck and all that. So it was good for a little while. And here I am getting older, and it's coming back to now I have to really like make it a point on a daily basis to take care, self-care of myself because pain
Yeah.
is like when you're in chronic pain, it doesn't matter what has happened. Chronic pain is a thing that brings people to suicide. That's what happens. Like, and I know people myself that have committed suicide because of chronic pain. So in my mindset, I'm not going there, first of all, and I will never allow myself to do that. And so I'm taking it upon myself, going to a spinal specialist and going through all this therapy, and ended up just actually they did Botox in my neck, which I didn't for pain. I had no
Yeah.
idea, which it released. I'm
Mm.
feeling better in my neck. I'm like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, the trauma in your body, like it was explained to me like this, because I am like this from that accident. I'm like this hard, the muscle just is totally contracted at all times. Well, that's trauma. That's trauma. And I did not even realize that my body for 24 years, it has been like that. And so now here I am. And like you were saying earlier, you've gotten this way in for years, and it doesn't take overnight. You have to, it's a process. But the trauma, it doesn't just affect the physical or the emotional,
Mhm.
it's affecting every part of you. And you have to make a determination every morning that I'm going to get up, I'm not laying in bed, I'm not going to be depressed, I'm not going to, you have to make that choice.
Yeah.
And but trauma that to the body, and trauma, if you've gone through anything in your past, abuse, anything like that can cause trauma. But can you touch on that, the effects of people? Because, you're hearing a lot of that lately, but I don't think a lot of people understand. Because, like I said, when he told me your body is in a state of trauma at all times, because this is just all it's in trauma. And so now I
Mhm.
have to work on getting it out of trauma. So can you touch on that, what you're seeing?
Well, there's a lot of people who have experienced rape or seen violence or, and so it comes out in hypervigilance, it comes out in
Mhm.
anxiety, it comes
Mhm.
out in physical pain and depression where you can't get out of
Yeah.
bed, like there's
Yeah.
lots of different ways. The mind is very, very powerful
Oh,
and
yes, it
it
is.
converts things in ways that we don't realize. And I think it's a matter of uncovering that, usually with a counselor, of figuring out
Yeah.
how is
Mhm.
this trauma impacting me and what areas of my life is it coming out in? Is it coming out physically? And are some of the physical ailments that I'm dealing with really just a matter of
Mhm.
Yeah.
trauma? And if I deal with that, does all the muscle tightness in my body go away,
Hmm.
if I'm able to release that and let go of that? I know there's different massage techniques
Oh
that are
yeah.
Mhm.
specifically for trauma, so it absolutely comes out, but it's different for everybody,
Yeah.
how it may manifest.
Yeah.
It's interesting though how, like, if you go through some emotional trauma, that it actually comes out physically.
Yeah.
It's
And that's why it's important to, which I don't think that our healthcare has gotten it right yet. It's important for your physical doctor and your counselor to all be on the same page, to talk to each. In my mind, they really should be talking to each
yes,
other,
they should.
because you don't, that the psychosomatic, responses, and your mind impacting your body and how your body is showing up. Because you could go to the physical doctor, say you don't
Mhm.
have a counselor, and you're just going for an exam, and say you are in chronic pain or whatnot, or you're experiencing anxiety, and it's showing up in high blood pressure and all these other things, but you don't talk
Right.
about the other things that are going on in your emotional mental state with your physical doctor or your GP. um, then you're missing a component of
Yes.
your care, and you don't know that it's rooted in something that is mental. And so if you're not talking, and sharing those things even with your medical doctor, then those things are getting missed.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I feel like that happens often because people don't want to, divulge. And then also doctors come in quickly and leave quickly, and so it's you're not spending a lot of time. So it's so important to work together with your healthcare professionals, because your physical doctor could be or your doctor can be treating you with, based on your physical symptoms of what you're presenting, but really it goes deeper.
Right. And you made a good point, and I don't know if things have changed, but I know I went through about 3.5 years in a pain clinic. And what happens is you really are signing your care over to the pain doctor. And so when you're going in there month after month after month, and really that's exactly what it happens. They're, you know, I actually felt sorry for my pain doctor because I saw all the people. You would go into this clinic and you saw the people and they're in such depression, and so I felt sorry for him because he would hear it over and over and over, and me going in there, I was just like, find something that's going to help me, find something, and he's like, no. It's like, but anyway, I think that it's so important to share that with your primary care physician because I don't know if they're communicating. I know they
Well,
weren't.
They don't a lot of times.
most insurance is requiring that. If
Mm,
you, have, like, a patient portal that you sign into, often like, for example, my primary care physician, as part of the paperwork for any kind of visit, I fill out a PHQ-9 and a GAD-7. A
mm,
Mm,
PHQ-9 is a physical health questionnaire, but that really is a
yeah,
depression
yeah,
screener, and
mhm.
the GAD-7 is a generalized anxiety
Yep.
disorder screener,
Mhm.
and so, both of those, I get a depression screener and an anxiety screener, and you may not even realize when you're filling out their paperwork
yeah.
that that is integrated into it.
Yeah.
But insurance is requiring that. A lot of the insurance companies are, and that is supposed to be done. I'm not saying all
That's good.
doctors do it, but
Yeah.
it is supposed to be integrated together. And if any of those screeners trigger, if there's a score, it triggers the doctor to give you a referral
Mhm.
to a counselor. And so we actually are seeing that quite a bit. We're getting paperwork faxed to us
Wow.
of referrals from that being triggered in their electronic medical records. When somebody is filling out those questionnaires, they'll give them a referral to a counseling office, and so it's
Mm,
supposed to be that way, that it's
Yeah.
integrated. It's not always that way, and
mhm.
we have an obligation as far as when we're taking insurance, that we are supposed to communicate with primary care physicians as well, and so part of our paperwork is a consent to communicate with their primary care, and we give quarterly updates to the primary care if the patient consents to that.
Yeah. See, I think
Yeah.
things have changed,
Yeah.
a lot, which is to the better,
We're
that's for sure.
changing
Yes.
if
Changing,
the
yeah.
Changing.
providers are following the rules, if
Right.
the
Right.
providers are
Yeah.
doing what they're supposed to, but not everybody
Mhm.
does what they're
Right.
Yeah.
supposed to.
On both ends, right? Because you have the counselor and the doctor, and are they both doing, what
Right.
are they coordinating care, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Coordination of care.
Yeah,
That's the key.
Mhm.
right.
Ah. Well, we are at 11 o'clock, which I can't believe because
Yeah.
we didn't even get to like half of these, not even a
Means we're
quarter.
gonna have to
We're
come
going to
back and
have
do
you
another
back,
one.
Mary. This has
That'd be
been
great.
really good. And honestly, like I said, after, we're having meetings trying to get the Sisterhood conference together. And as I'm doing questionnaires with the women, the biggest thing is we want to hear about self-care. We want to hear about the anxiety. We want to hear about, because people are having a hard time dealing with it. And so just, I guess, promoting that, yes, there's nothing wrong. There's not a stigma, and hopefully it's not there anymore. It used to be years and years ago, but there shouldn't be a stigma. Everybody needs, the Lord put us together
Right.
as a
Right.
community of people, and we need each other. And so there's nothing wrong if you feel, oh, I need to talk to somebody. Give Insight Counseling a call.
Right.
Absolutely.
The hardest part is making that first call and
Yep.
walking in the very first time, and
Mhm.
we know that and understand that and honor that it is really hard to do that
It
first
is.
time. But once you
Mhm.
do the first time, it's great. You know,
Yeah.
like it's easy after that. It's just doing that first
Yeah.
step.
Mhm.
Amen. Well, thank you
Awesome.
so much, Mary, for being with
Thank
us
you for
today.
having
Yes, thank
me.
you.
Yes, we appreciate you and God bless you. And you guys, we will see you next month at the Sisterhood Global Network online. And you guys all have a blessed day.
Thanks.
Bye.